Everybody, and welcome again to our Clarity 7 Lunch and Learn topics. And we're glad to have everyone who has joined today. A lot of you from our first Lunch and Learn last week, and some new ones on the line as well this week as well. So glad to have you. To the Canadians who are on the line, we hope you had a wonderful long Thanksgiving weekend. And here we are Tuesday already and back at it. But we're glad to have you, and so we're going to keep things moving along, given we're only at have 15 minutes for these. And again, I want to encourage you to make this interactive and as valuable as possible for each of you. So please make sure that you look on your GoToWebinar listing there and enter in your questions into that, because we'll have time for questions at the end. We'll make sure we leave time. And we're happy to answer all of those questions for you as we go forward. So your audience, or your hosts today, of course, are myself, Ian Margerson, and Bob Gill, who handled the session last week, is our key, one of our key architects who will be handling the sessions through the month. At least that's the plan. So glad to have Bob on the line as well. So just for those of you who may not have been here last Tuesday, was the first Lunch and Learn for this month, and that topic was copying a report in traffic lighting. And so that session was recorded, and we're happy to pass along the recording to you if you would like to have that recording. Just send me a note and we'll give you access to the recording of last week's session. This week, today, our topic is creating dynamic columns in Clarity 7, and Bob will be taking us through that. And then just a reminder, next Tuesday, applying sorting. The following Tuesday, using referenced variables. And again, we are more than happy to address any specific topics that you may have. So please don't hesitate to fire me a note and say, hey, I'd love it if you did a Lunch and Learn on this or on that. And we're all ears. We're running these, of course, through the month of October. But if there is interest and demand, we're happy to jump into these for another month later on, depending on what your interest and topics you'd like to cover. So again, these are just 15-minute sessions, provide you with tips and tricks for clarity, make available our experts like Bob for Q&A, and of course to introduce ourselves for those of you who aren't already our clients on anything to do with Clarity 7, helping you with that, FSR, disclosure management, a lot of time now helping our clients with upgrade and transitions from Clarity to Cognos, CM1, the BI and Express. A lot of activity as well on cloud and helping to move our clients to cloud and leveraging planning analytics, including things like Watson and SPSS. So we would love to help you out in any of those areas that you have questions or are curious. So with that, I will turn you over to Bob for today's topic, creating dynamic columns in Clarity 7. And so Bob, I'll turn it over to you. And we'll be back at the end to pick up questions and look for questions.
Great, thanks Ian. So today we're talking about dynamic columns. So I thought I'd give everyone an overview of what we're going to go through, and then they'll give some context for what you're seeing. So dynamic columns are really being able to expand across columns or rows in any kind of row or column range. So static works too. You can have static column and row ranges, and those are fine. But dynamic columns have some properties that can be very handy for things like forecasting. So typically, having dynamic columns comes up around the concept of forecasting. And today we're going to walk through one of those examples. So in today's task, we want to select the last closed period with actuals. So maybe at this point you've got an annual budget that's already been signed off. You're kind of going through the monitoring of that budget through the fiscal year, and you want to make sure, always have your eye on, what's our current forecast for the end of this fiscal year. And typically what folks tend to do is they, up to the last closed period, they want to see actuals, because we have actuals at that point, and they want to see their remaining forecast, which really is usually it starts with the budget for remaining periods, but then that forecast can be adjusted period to period. Towards the end of the fiscal year. So you have show actuals in all periods up to and including the one selected. And we're going to show forecast as a scenario for the remaining year. Commonly this is a system setting, but I've left this as an option for learning purposes. And what I mean by this is you wouldn't, in these templates, you'll see an option for a particular month. Typically, that's something that an administrator sets, and then managers or people using the system wouldn't necessarily get to change that. So what we're going to go through, and these are some things to check. So we want to make sure that we have insert new is checked in each of our column ranges. And the rows or columns need to have multiple items. If you only have one item selected in a row or column range, it's only going to be that large. There's no need for it to be dynamic. We're going to make sure that we use bottom level descendants, because this is here we're using gross margin as an item. We're using variables as well. Now, I'll talk about sorting and variables in future lunch and learns, but just to let you know that we do use variables to figure out which periods to show. We'll go into that more later on. We also want to make sure we have the protection set. So read-only cells should be locked. So something like actuals, we want to make sure those are read-only. Not that anyone could change them, but when they're set as locked, they'll get a nice message. If they try to change it, they'll get a nice message saying, hey, this is locked, you can't change it. And also the fill down and right, they do respect the locked setting. So if folks are looking at a range that has actuals and forecast data in there, when they use the fill down or fill right options, those will work fine. They won't overwrite actuals or anything. And also the percentage change ones are handy as well. So let's take a look at this in clarity then. So let's assume we start with this template. This is a very simple template. If I look at my options, the last actuals period, I can select a period. Say I pick June. I see it changed to June. I pick August. I see it changed to August. So we're pulling live data, but you see I've only got one column for my actuals and one column for my base plan. So it's not really that exciting right now. Really what I want to do is I want to show this as 12 periods across, and I want to have it split at the right point. So this is what we're starting with, and what we're going to end up with is something like this, where same option, so we pick, here we're showing August, what if we change it to June? Now note when I click OK, you'll see that actuals will go to June, and then I'll have my forecast through the remaining of the year. So with formatting, you'll see that this yellow tends to tell folks that this is something they can change, whereas this white background tells folks this is something that's read-only. And all this is done with dynamic columns. So if we look at the actual template, so again, we're going to walk through this list of items to check. So we want to make sure that on our column ranges, we have this insert additional columns is checked. Oftentimes you'll see that there's another option for delete unused columns. You can have that, it's not really necessary, but the one that's necessary is insert additional columns. I notice that right now it's highlighting the row range here in the split view that we're talking about the budget range. And then if I also look at my actuals range, so it knows I still have the insert additional columns, and right now it's just showing the one column here. Now folks from prior versions of Clarity may ask, do we need to have the R1.R1 notation in hidden rows or columns? You don't need that in Clarity 7. You just need to define the row range here on the document work pane, and then it creates an Excel range that can be referenced. So once we've checked that we've got the insert new columns item checked, we want to make sure that we're showing, we've got multiple items on a row or column. So we're going to go to the Data tab. Here, the pages that are already set. So we've got our different page filters that we've got set up. These could be page options, that would be fine. But the point of interest is the column range, where we've hard-coded it, the first one, to be actual with a variable here for time. Similarly, if we look at the column the group for budget, we've hard-coded it to base plan with a variable for time. Now this variable, it defines a range of which periods to be shown. So I'll go into for purposes of today, just to know that all you need to know is that it's a variable that you can, once it's set up, you can select from this variables tab here. But in future weeks, we'll go into the detail of what the formula is and why. We also want to check that on the rows, we are looking at bottom level leaves. So anytime we're using something that we're going to be saving data back to, we want to make sure that we're using bottom level leaves, because these will go across the two ranges that we have above. If we have something that's a higher level item, when folks save back to that, it can cause undesirable behavior. You may save, if you try to save, in this case, to gross margin, maybe save $1 million to gross margin, it's going to, if there's 100 accounts, let's say there's 1,000 accounts, it's going to save $1,000, it's going to save $1,000 to every account, which is not necessarily the right way you want that to spread. So as a best practice, I recommend always using bottom level leaves for anything to do with saving data back. So we've looked at the variable. Protection is also important. So if I right click on a cell here and look at format cells, the protection tab, see this one says locked because these are actuals. Now if I look at the cell directly adjacent, this is a cell that I want folks to be able to change. So this is set to, does not have the locked item checked. Another way of looking at that is also to look at the properties. I want to make sure that my row range for budget has this this update available, whereas the one for actuals is only retrieve. It does not allow updates. So this is one more way to be sure that works as expected. So once we've got this, there's some neat tools we can use. So let's say we wanted to take just August and double it. So I can increase by 100% just in August by selecting this percentage change tool. And this is a standard tool. It does not require any customization. It's available in the tools section of the features tab. So when I look at the edit piece, there's my percentage change. I just have to select it here from this tools list, and I can do that. Similarly, we've also got, let's say I want this to be 1.12 million all the way across. I just click that, and it does the fill right within range. Now if I come over here and I try and fill right, it doesn't work. It respects the locked cells that are here and doesn't change them, which is important. I'm not concerned that they would be saved because there's other things protecting that, but for visually when folks are working with this, if they can come in here and they can see a number change, then that may lead them to believe it would be saved. So this is just being explicitly clear and making sure that we don't misrepresent what's happening in the system. So we looked at fill down, fill right within range, percentage change, sorting we'll get to in a future one. I also want to briefly touch on row and column format. So I can adjust these items here within the web sheet. And I don't necessarily need to, maybe I want to hide that column. So I can hide that column. Or I want to hide that row. That's fine. So these work on whatever row or column you have selected with the cursor at the time. So quick recap. We were talking about dynamic columns today, where you can expand across columns or rows. We looked at a forecasting example where you can select the last close period with actuals, and we see actuals up to and including the one selected and forecast for the remaining year. These are the items that you'd want to check to make sure you've got these two dynamic columns working in tandem to always show you 12 periods of the fiscal year. And then in future lunch and learns, we'll talk about sorting and the reference variables, in particular the reference variables we use here. So Ian, I'll pass it back to you for just any quick questions, and then we can wrap it up.
All right, Bob. Boy, 15 minutes again goes by very quickly. So thank you very much for that, Bob. Appreciate that. And so just, we wanted to open it up for Q&A. What are we at? We're just at the 15-minute mark, but if there's any questions, please drop them into the line there. There was a lot of learning there in that short time. At the moment, there doesn't appear to be any questions that have come in. I'll just give you a minute or a few seconds if someone has a question to pop in. Otherwise, by all means, there's our contact information and my contact information. Please reach out We're anxious to make sure we're doing these on topics that are of use to you. So please fire us a note and an email if you have any specific questions or topics you'd like to cover. No questions appear to have come in, Bob, so you must have covered it off for everybody. So thanks very much, Bob. Thanks, everybody, for our 15-minute Lunch and Learn. All the best in the rest of your week, and we look forward to seeing you next Tuesday, same time. Take care, and bye for now.